Our prosperity as a nation depends upon the personal, financial prosperity of each of us as individuals. George S. Clason. The purpose of this presentation is to explore the current status of the macroeconomy in the United States and to further examine the factors that will influence economic conditions in the near term as the country works through the coronavirus pandemic. Ray Dalio is the billionaire founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund. Dalio is worried about the US's ability to compete with China. He labels the current economic condition as a non-market political economy, and he suggests this represents a new paradigm. Dalio suggests that we are at the end of the cycle. These economic cycles are known to repeat and are associated with three driving forces. These three driving forces have been in place since before the dawn of the coronavirus, and this lethal economic combination has not existed in our lifetimes before. The first driving force is long-term debt cycle. We are at the end of a world cycle that began in 1945 with the New World Order, where we established the dollar as the world reserve currency. It was connected to gold until 1971. Dalio says there was an arc which central banks had the capacity to produce demand by producing credit. But when interest rates are no longer effective or hit zero, as they did in 2008, this brings us to the driving force number 2, which is monetary policy. In other words, this is the printing of money and the buying of financial assets. The central bank buys more bonds in order to fill in gaps. And they can't let interest rates rise. We already have too much debt. Interest rates rising would mean that asset prices would all go down, and that makes the US vulnerable. The goal is to maintain lots of US dollar liquidity in the world, bidding up assets, and thus creating an environment that is very good for US capitalism. And the third driving force is the rise of a great power to challenge the existing world leadership of the United States. Periods of prosperity often occur after wars. So you could say that prosperity is its highest during periods of peace. In other words, when there is peace, it is because there is a dominant power that no one wants to fight. These times mark great periods of development in technology, etc., and prosperity expansion. This creates wealth gaps, value gaps, and political gaps. Our wealth gap is now the largest since the 1930s, and the political gap is also very large. And so that influence is a giant influence in today's world economy. The coronavirus came along and was a major knockback that has big financial implications. Today, the economy and the markets are driven by the central banks and the coordination with the central government. So, the purchases right now of financial assets by the Federal Reserve are the drivers of that market. So purchases for government securities, etc. And we are on the trajectory of going towards the European standard. Interest rates will be negative, with credits to banks coming from government banks, so that central banks are taking on all that debt in an effort to reinflate our financial system. We are going to see central bank balance sheets explode because they will take on as much debt as it takes to try and slow the sinking ship. The goal is to keep order and to maintain acceptable economic conditions. The nation is prosperous on the whole, but how much prosperity is there in a whole? Will Rogers. Thank you.